I thought I was completely alone at that gas station in the middle of nowhere. No cars, no people. Just rain, darkness, and silence. Until I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a man sitting in my back seat. Not outside, not near my car, inside it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been following me for hours, and I was seconds away from disappearing. This happened last year during a solo road trip I was taking from Wisconsin to Montana. Most of the drive was nothing but empty highways, forests, open fields, and long stretches of darkness. Aside from the first and last hour near cities, everything in between felt completely isolated. Because of my schedule, I decided to drive through the night instead of splitting the trip into 2 days. I knew it would be exhausting, but I wanted to avoid paying for another hotel and just get it done in one long push. I started driving around 7 p.m., double-checked my bags, stocked up on snacks, and hit the road. The first hour passed through small towns and traffic, but after that, the highway opened up into empty land. Hardly any cars. Gas stations spaced far apart. Just darkness stretching endlessly ahead. After a couple of hours, I noticed the stations becoming fewer and farther between, so I decided to stop and top off my tank before heading deeper into the rural stretch. It took nearly 20 minutes before I found a small gas station. It was tiny, only 4 pumps, and the convenience store was closed. No other cars were there. I pulled up, got out, and started pumping gas. The pump was painfully slow, barely dripping fuel like it hadn't been used in ages. I leaned against my car, waiting. That's when another vehicle came down the road. The speed limit was 55, but this car was crawling, maybe 20 or 30 miles an hour. It passed the station, slowed down, then reversed back toward the entrance and pulled in behind me. That alone felt strange. Reversing on a dark highway in the middle of nowhere isn't exactly safe. I assumed they must have missed the entrance and really needed gas. I kept facing forward as I heard the driver step out, but I didn't hear him start pumping. I didn't hear any movement at all. After a moment, curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced over. The man was already staring at me. He was tall, wearing a gray flannel shirt and black jeans. His eyes were locked directly onto mine, unblinking, heavy, empty. I forced an awkward smile and nodded, then looked away. Even after turning back, I could feel his gaze burning into me. 10 long seconds passed before I finally heard him grab the pump and start fueling his car. I felt a wave of relief and told myself I was overthinking. Once my tank was full, I put the nozzle away and turned toward my door. He was staring at me again. This time his eyes looked even stranger, dull and exhausted, like someone running purely on caffeine and adrenaline. I got into my car and drove away, brushing it off as just another weird encounter on a long night drive. Hours passed. Rain began to fall. By now it was past midnight, and fatigue was creeping in fast. The rain made visibility worse, forcing me to stay extra focused, which only drained me more. Energy drinks weren't helping anymore. Around 1 a.m., I knew I needed a break. And gas again. I eventually spotted another rundown station glowing in the distance and pulled in. Just like before, it was empty but still lit. I filled my tank, parked beside the building, checked the weather, and searched for nearby towns. There were none. I was officially in the middle of nowhere. I decided to set a 30-minute alarm and take a quick nap to recharge. Rain drummed against the roof as I drifted off. When I woke up about 25 minutes later, the rain was still pounding. My alarm hadn't even gone off yet. I sat up and looked through the windshield. There was a car parked at one of the pumps. My stomach dropped. It was the same car from the first gas station. I was almost certain of it. Either this was an impossible coincidence, or something was very wrong. Even stranger, I couldn't see the man anywhere. He wasn't inside the car. He wasn't outside. There was nowhere else he could possibly be at this empty station. Panic crept up my spine. I turned the key and shifted into reverse. As I checked my mirror, I saw him. Not behind the car, not outside. He was sitting in my back seat. His eyes stared straight into mine through the darkness. My body reacted before my brain could process what I was seeing. I threw the door open and jumped out onto the wet pavement as the car slowly continued rolling backward. I ran. I didn't hear him chase me. I didn't hear a door open. I ran into the nearby trees and turned back just in time to see my car roll to a stop. Then the engine revved. He drove away. My car disappeared down the dark highway, leaving me stranded in the rain. That's when reality hit even harder. My phone was still inside the car. I stood there shaking, soaked, trying to process what had just happened, until I noticed something else. The man had left his own car behind. I cautiously approached it. The door was unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. Groceries sat on the back seat, and on the floor near the passenger side, a phone. I used the emergency call function on the lock screen and contacted 911. Later, investigators discovered the truth. That car wasn't his either. It had been stolen from another victim, someone who hadn't escaped as lucky as I had. They believed the man hadn't revealed himself in my back seat by accident. He likely planned to wait until I was driving at highway speed before making his move. He was never found. Neither was my car. And I still don't know what would have happened if I hadn't looked in that mirror when I did. Next story. I opened my front door to leave for just a few minutes, and there was a man standing less than a foot away from my face. He didn't look surprised. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me through a scarf covering his mouth. I thought it was just a strange coincidence, until hours later, I saw his footprints circling my house in the snow and realized he never really left. This happened last year, in the middle of January. I live in a small house in a quiet, wooded town about 45 minutes outside the city. It's the kind of place where you rarely see strangers walking around. Most homes are tucked deep into the trees with long driveways and almost no street traffic. That day, I only worked a half shift, so I planned to spend the evening relaxing at home. Around 7 o'clock, I got an unexpected call from a friend. His car had broken down at work, and he asked if I could give him a ride home, maybe grab some food too. I didn't mind at all and told him I'd head over. I grabbed my jacket from the closet, picked up my keys, and opened the front door. My entire body jolted. There was a man standing directly in front of me on the porch, less than a foot away from the door. He was wearing a heavy winter coat and a black neck gaiter pulled up over the lower half of his face. I couldn't see his mouth at all. What made it even stranger was that he didn't react to my sudden appearance. No flinch, no surprise. He just stood there, completely still. For a split second, I felt embarrassed for getting startled. Then confusion kicked in. Why was this guy standing on my porch? Before I could say anything, he apologized and said he was just about to knock. I asked what he needed. He hesitated for a moment, then asked if I was someone named David or Daryl. I wasn't sure which name he said, but it definitely wasn't mine. I told him no. He simply said, "Okay," turned around, and started walking down my driveway. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me, watching until he walked all the way down the long driveway and disappeared toward the road before I got into my car. The whole drive to my friend's workplace, I couldn't stop thinking about how strange that interaction felt. People don't usually wander onto random properties out here. The houses are spaced far apart, deep in the woods. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was honestly just looking for someone else and got the wrong house. I picked up my friend, grabbed some food, dropped him off, and headed home. It was around 9 p.m. by the time I pulled back into my driveway. Light snow was falling, and everything was quiet and calm. I went inside, warmed up, turned on the TV, and relaxed on the couch. I wasn't keeping track of time since I didn't have work the next day. A couple of hours passed before I started feeling tired. As I turned off the TV and headed toward the stairs, I suddenly remembered the man from earlier. On impulse, I walked over to the front door and looked through the peephole. The porch was empty, The snow was still falling gently. Nothing seemed out of place. But then I noticed something crossing the driveway. It was hard to see clearly, so I opened the door slightly and leaned out for a better look. There were fresh footprints in the thin layer of snow. They came all the way up my driveway from the road, passed near my car, and then continued off into the yard, disappearing into the trees. My stomach dropped. If this was the same man, then something was seriously wrong. I locked the door and started scanning through the windows, trying to figure out what to do. The more I thought about how strange the encounter had been earlier, the worse my gut feeling became. I decided to call 911. As I explained what I was seeing, I kept hearing faint noises, soft, subtle sounds that stopped every time I tried to focus on them. I was starting to feel ridiculous, like I was imagining things. Then, suddenly a violent thud slammed against the back of my house. I almost dropped my phone. Another heavy impact followed. Someone was outside my back door. Through the glass, I could only see vague movement in the darkness. Whatever was hitting the door was heavy, like a tool or some kind of weapon. The operator told me to either find a place to hide or get out of the house if I could safely escape. I grabbed my keys and ran. Even knowing someone was behind my house, sprinting into the open night was terrifying. I half expected someone else to be waiting for me near my car, but I made it inside, started the engine, and drove away as fast as I could. When police arrived later, they found the back door badly damaged and wet footprints throughout the house. Whoever it was had broken in, but they were already gone. All I could give officers was a description of the man from my porch earlier. They couldn't confirm if it was the same person. They never found him. What still scares me most is how ordinary that day had been. Nothing felt dangerous until it suddenly was. If I hadn't seen those footprints, I might have gone to bed without ever realizing someone was already circling my house. Sometimes, knowing he was never caught, I still feel like I'm just waiting for it to happen again. Next story. I was babysitting a 3-year-old boy when a strange car pulled up outside the house and just sat there with its headlights on. Then the child's mother called me, asking why I had just tried to call her from an unknown number, even though my phone never moved. An hour later, I saw a man trying to force his way into the house from the back door. And when the door finally broke open, he wasn't empty-handed. He was holding a knife. This happened back in 2019, when I was a sophomore in college. I was babysitting 3 or 4 nights a week to help pay off my car, and for about a month, I'd been watching the same 3-year-old boy once a week. His parents were quiet but friendly. They usually left right around his bedtime, so my job was simple: make sure he stayed asleep and keep an eye on the house for 4 or 5 hours. That night, I arrived around 8 p.m. The parents told me he was already asleep in his room, thanked me, and headed out. I never really asked where they went every week that late. I think they once mentioned going into the city, maybe date nights or something. I set my bag down, did my usual walkthrough of the house, and sat in the living room scrolling on my phone. Every so often, I checked on the kid to make sure he was still sleeping. Not even an hour had passed when my phone rang. It was the mother. She sounded confused and asked if I had just called her. I told her no. I'd been sitting on the couch the whole time and hadn't touched my phone. She said she'd received a call from an unknown number, but when she answered, nobody spoke. She wondered if maybe I had a new phone or if something glitched. I reassured her everything was fine and that the kid was still asleep. She apologized for bothering me and hung up. At the time, I brushed it off as a weird phone mistake. About 20 minutes later, headlights suddenly filled the front windows. The light slipped through the cracks in the blinds. At first, I assumed it was a neighbor pulling in, but the lights didn't turn off. After a minute, I walked over and peeked through the blinds. A dark gray sedan was parked directly in front of the house. It looked old and rusted, with heavily tinted windows. As I stared at it, I noticed a man standing a few feet away from the car near the sidewalk, facing the house. He wasn't moving. He was just staring up at the windows. I felt uneasy but didn't want to confront anyone since it wasn't my house. After about a minute, the man got back into the car and slowly pulled away, almost like he was still watching the house as he left. I followed the headlights down the road through the trees, and then they stopped. The lights stayed on for a moment in the distance, then shut off completely. It looked like the car had parked somewhere down the road. I stayed by the window for several minutes, but nothing else happened. I told myself maybe he was just lost or visiting a neighbor. I almost texted the parents but didn't want to scare them over something that might have been nothing. I turned on the TV quietly and opened the blinds so I could keep an eye outside. Nearly 2 hours passed with nothing unusual. I started getting tired and half dozing on the couch when I heard a faint thump. At first, I thought I imagined it, until I heard it again. I stood up and started walking toward the stairs to check on the child. As I passed through the hallway, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Someone was outside the back door. A man was gripping the handle and staring directly at me through the glass. The moment our eyes met, he began yanking on the handle violently, trying to force it open. Adrenaline hit instantly. I ran upstairs, grabbed the child from his bed, and held him tightly, trying not to panic him. Downstairs, the pounding grew louder, heavier, like he was using something to break the door. With the child in my arms, I rushed back downstairs toward the front door. That's when I heard a sharp crack of breaking plastic and metal. The back door burst open. The man rushed inside. I barely registered what he looked like. Dark hair, casual clothes, until I saw the knife in his hand. He ran straight toward me. I bolted out the front door, threw the child into the car, jumped into the driver's seat, and reversed just as the man reached my window. I sped away and drove to a safe location while calling 911 and the parents. By the time police arrived, the man was gone. I truly believe he intended to threaten me or hurt me so he could take the child. What still unsettles me is how he knew the parents would be gone, and why that child specifically. After that night, the parents thanked me once, and then completely cut off contact. They never hired me again. It was like they didn't want any questions asked. Later, I found out the mother had once been married to a man who looked similar to the intruder. I'll never know the full truth, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to.